Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 324. I am your host, Lauren Gray, and I welcome you all to our live broadcast on Friday morning, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. With that in mind, our single topic, single hour discussion today is focused on creating social media campaigns. Of course, we'll also cover a few newsworthy items that are in our dialogue this week that have come up as we begin to go through different processes still in our daily world of hospitality, the changes in our market, and the changes of influence on what's impacting our market. So, with that, let's get to the topic of hospitality social media marketing campaigns. Let me first make a predication to the entire process of hospitality social media. If you approach it from the perspective of it being just a sales channel, you are destined to fail. You'll get some messaging out and you will have traffic generated from your efforts because paid efforts do generate traffic, but you will not get the success that is truly warranted for the platforms that you would be using. The idea of social media in its entirety is the understanding that you are communicating, that there is a dialogue going on. Dialogue meaning there is a two-way conversation to this. Oftentimes, I get asked by clients, should we turn off comments to our social media? Should we not show comments to our social media? And those are two different questions, and we'll hit both. Should I turn comments off? No. Having a closed door reaction to anything that you post on social media means that you're really not understanding the platform as being a communication tool. You're not broadcasting. Broadcasting is a different form of communication. Social media is an interaction, a dialogue, a back and forth. People respond and react to what you're posting beyond the simple likes, shares, and comments if you allow them. You should always allow them. Now, whether they always get shown is a different question that answers to, well, will you be monitoring what is said? And the reason why that's so critically important to the process of social media is if you are allowing comments, but you yourself are not responding to those comments, then it quickly shows your lack of attention and or prioritization to what you're using the platform for. If you put out how cool and great it is and all these cool things to do at your destination for whatever you're posting at the time, and then people make comments in response to that and maybe even solicit questions to it like, well, when is that available? Or do you have a special price for that? Or where do I find out more information? Or whatever their dialogue is, as innocuous as it is, if you don't respond to those comments, that dialogue back, insensitivity comes across. At which point that you begin to get the trolling that is, in some strange ways, warranted for your lack of attention, where people will begin to like knock knock anybody home and all these other fun things, and then they get much worse than that. Believe me. So it's critically important that if you're going to allow the comments to be posted to what you're putting on the page, then be present and aware that you will have to monitor it, that your responses are in a very short period of time. As a matter of fact, the platforms such as Facebook actually measure the response time, as well as Google, to your comments that are onto your platform. It shows an attentiveness. It shows an attentiveness if you have a phone number up there and you answer the phone or dialogue back with them. It keeps track of your engagement in response and indicates that on the platform. If you're not familiar with that already, you just simply look around, you see, oh, these people tend to reply back in such and such time, what have you. And that shows you an active dialogue, that this is a platform of communication, an avenue of discussion with this business, your business. And so you must, in your process of using social media, be aware that it is an open dialogue that you will have to keep engaged with for all the efforts that you're putting into it. If you're using it simply to advertise and offer, again, you are missing the point of social media. Another precursor to our discussion of creating campaigns, the actual value proposition of social media in the context of your advertising campaign. Advertising campaigns are based on a timeline. Uh, we'll use revenue management references in this as well because there is a symbiotic and combined um, combination of marketing and revenue management. Convergence is the word I was looking for, between the two disciplines being integrated into one. Now, in the timeline of business, revenue management looks at very firm actual points of reference. You have a variable lead time booking window where people make the choice of conversion or purchase. You have the actual arrival of that purchase, the duration of their stay, being a hotel, of that purchase, and a departure time. Those are quantifiable date references that's used in data from revenue management to determine aspects of their strategy of rate, opportunity, and inventory restrictions and what have you. Marketing has a broader spectrum of timeline, all in predication and inclusive of those timelines as well. Let's just talk about the preemptive ones. Prior to your prime booking window, which is, and I hate using the word funnel, but I mean, I hate it's a strong word. I dislike using the word funnel, but funnel is probably the most visual commonality representation of what people refer to. The point of acquisition, ZMOD, is a very narrow casted part of the entire previous dialogue. That moment of conversion that says, yes, I would like to buy click, or I would like to buy call, or whatever it is that they do to facilitate their purchase, is at the end of a very long string of engagement. It starts with discovery. Discovery is a very large, broad spectrum. To put it in context, it's a lot like, what do I want to do? I want to go on vacation. Where do I want to go on vacation? What are my choices that I'm interested in? What would I do if I was there? How am I going to get there? Where am I going to stay if I'm there? What am I going to do once I'm there based on where I'm staying? And on and on and on. That discovery then turns into what's called education. Education is the interpretation of once making decisions, what do I need more about them, either to expand the decision or decline the, I want to go to Aspen. Well, I go to Aspen. Oh, though it's pretty expensive, or it's going to be hard for me to fly there. I have to go there, and then I have to fly there. I have to take a bus there, or whatever. Maybe I should choose someplace else. So discovery doesn't warrant conversion. Discovery is the first stage. Education begins to warrant the consideration, okay, of conversion. So there's a progression of discovery, education, then goes into a process of conversion to the point of conversion, which is what most revenue managers refer to as the booking window. That's that prime time that people often make choices as to when they're going to be purchasing for what dates ahead of time, which is their lead time. If I'm purchasing within 14 to 21 days of a stay versus 3 months to a stay, because depending upon the demand of inventory and so forth, that all comes from the education and discovery process. So social media, how does this fit into this? Social media is a amplifier to all of your efforts. Think of it as an electric guitar. Doesn't sound very good unless it's plugged into an amplifier. Just sounds, unless you're putting it real close, you can't even really hear what you're doing. Plug it into amplifier, totally different world. Social media does that with your messaging of content and what you're trying to get people to be aware of in the discovery, education, and conversion phases, because it allows for them to engage with you. Unlike advertising, which is, here's some information and here's an action item to bring you to more information. We want you to be aware of this. Come here to find out more so we can convince you to purchase. That is about a purchase decision that's already close to that point of, oh, well, you know what? I've been wanting to go there. That's what I want. I've been looking around. That's what I think is best. Let me go buy it. That means that all of the precursors of being discovery and education have already been gone through, and they're at that moment of ZMOT. Google refers to it, zero moment of transaction or transition, um, which is their purchase time. So how do you get into the earlier funnels? Social media does that for you. Now, advertisement does it for you as well in the paid sense, but it's a lot of money. You normally find the discovery and education phases occupied by brands and OTAs, destination marketing, because there's a lot of non-conversion value. There's not a lot of ROI. When you put the metric of ROI to discovery advertisement or education advertisement, it doesn't play well. This is in your world of display ads and so forth, where you're dealing with how many millions of impressions can you get versus how many thousands of people actually follow through with, that's interesting. Let me click on that. Or let me find out more about that. So it's a matter of brand awareness and opportunity. It's to make sure that you're in the earlier parts of the dialogue. As we often say in our strategies, the first step best be in the right direction. Because if you make the first step in the wrong direction, you have a lot of retreading to go back and start to the point where then go in the right direction. So make sure your choices are good at the very beginning. Well, that's the value hook of getting into the discovery and education phases of people's process of acquisition of staying with you at your hotel or resort or going to your restaurant. Your affordable way of doing this is to get somewhere past the initial discovery of, I don't know what I want, to, I have an idea, let me look at options. It's a transitional point between discovery and education. And this is where your social media can come in, because as they begin to look at information that you have available, then from that, you can go and make sure that you are part of that discussion. And let me explain that as I drink coffee. Content, as we've talked about many times, both live show and on our podcast, is the core element of what you're doing. Nothing about what you talk about on social should not have a reference point to solid content on your website. You want to become an authority based on the traffic that you're generating from different platforms to your website. So having the content related to what you're sharing on social is a very critical component. Having just a post, as we know, news feeds flow. Just having a post on your page doesn't necessarily mean it will always be forever found that way. It can be buried because as you post more on your news feed, it actually gets pushed farther down. And people don't take all of that to say, let me go through the entire news feed of what they have. No, it has to be front and center a lot of times, which means it has to be the most latest or the most relevant according to what they were engaged with. The best way to handle that is paid social. So, social in the context of sharing content and then driving it to your website so people discover your website's authenticity. Hey, this is a great website. It's about this XYZ hotel, but it's talking about the ABC things around it and the destination I'm interested in. Seems like it's a good location or all whatever trigger points are their interest. Okay, price point, whatever. They're becoming aware of it because of the content you have on your website. So, content is related directly to your social media efforts. Your organic social is a support to your paid social. Long ago, social media platforms such as Facebook and so forth stopped being the organic source relevancy that they were, primarily when they came around to being publicly traded and so forth, and they had to show revenue all the time and growth. And it's turned into a paid relationship. These are old numbers, but they're relevant numbers. In general context, Facebook determines based on their algorithms, and that's been in the news quite recently as to what these algorithms do and how they try to pander to your interests. Um, 84 to 86% of all of the traffic you see in your newsfeed is related to your inner circle of relationships between friends and family, people that you follow and engage with. They are the dominant content in your newsfeed. Now, it is suggested that at any one time, Facebook can have 1,500 plus items in your newsfeed. The reality is that they narrow that down to about 300 because nobody just even picture 300. That's a lot to be scrolling through at any given time or through the course of a day. And it constantly changes every time you refresh. So this algorithm is trying to put the most interesting, relevant things in front of you so that you spend more time on the platform, spend more time in general for it, and use it as a reference in your daily life. And we know in the news that's been successfully done many times. So here you have content that is showing up 1,500 now down to 300, and 84 to 86% of it is related to friends and family. Of that beyond is 10 to 13% is related to what's called viral content. Content that is distributed and being distributed and is newsworthy and people are sharing it at a high premium and it's very much in the active news cycle or active share cycle. And so Facebook feels in order to continue that perpetuation of viral, like therefore there's enough people interested, it must be interesting to enough people. They share it into your newsfeed. That leaves a fractional percentages 2%, 3%, optimistically 4% of content that you as a user has said, I'm interested in seeing what they post. And that includes our business pages, things that we post organically. And Facebook says, well, we make sure that we try to share that content with the cream of the crop, the most likely people to be interested based on their habits and behavior to want to see the content you're sharing because they're actively involved in looking for that content or dialogue with that content or what have you. Their algorithm saying, well, you know what? They've been looking at a lot of stuff in your destination. So obviously, if you posted new content about your destination on your page, they probably want to see it. That's only a fraction of the percentage of traffic that you see in your newsfeed. And it doesn't mean it's sitting on the top of your newsfeed. It's somewhere in those 300 items in your newsfeed based on what uh, Facebook thinks is the most relevantly interesting things you want to see about. So banking on organic to be your voice on social is not your strongest suit. The real play to this is your paid social. Paying Facebook, paying and these platforms, we're just going to picking on Facebook because it's a 800-pound gorilla in the social platform space, to be put in front of the people that are most likely, according to what you designate, are those that want to know what it is that you're saying. So for that reason, paid social is a key element to the discussion of discovery, and education. Talking too soon with them being not too certain about what they're interested in, you may squander a lot of your opportunity and cost to get in front of people that have yet to decide that you're even important enough or interesting enough to be part of the education process of like, oh, you know what? Now that I've kind of got a feel for which way I want to go, let me find out more about XYZ. And you might be in that discussion, but you might not be at the point where they're looking at where they're going to stay, in as much as they might be looking at what they're going to be interested in. If you have great content about that on your website, you still could be in that dialogue. That's the value proposition of having good content about your destination. You could be in the answer boxes with Google. We've had that discussion on the live show as well. You might be in an earlier point of discovery than other places from the value of the content that you have, beyond the content just representing your business. Like, this is how many rooms we have, this is our rate, this is what we have available. That's fine when they're close to the decision process. But the discovery and education processes are more about, this is how close we are to stuff. This is our relevancy to what you're interested in if it's event-driven thing. These are things that you should find interesting if you like this kind of thing to do. We have a great thing in our market that you can do that with. Sometimes it's about, well, I love bungee jumping. Well, how many places can you bungee jump? I'm sure there's not millions. There's probably only thousands. That makes it a unique part that there's an audience of people you want to pursue, that kind of thing. So paid social is your amplifier to your organic content that you already have in place for your website. It brings you in front of people at different stages between discovery and education. And I believe the earliest part for any property or business to ever loftily think of being a part of directly themselves, paid for themselves, paid social or what have you, is in the transitional part between discovery and education. That should be the loftiest part. Anything higher than that, and you just are spending a lot of funds for the hope of being the choice. And you might drive traffic all the way down to the point them directly interested in you, but then they buy from somebody else because they were rate driven, or the other location they chose was a different asset of that's something that they had that you didn't, and you paid all the money for them to basically be discovered, and they got the acquisition. So that's where that runs. Now, there is a logic of riding on the coattails of those that do aspire higher. OTA advertisement is one way of doing that. CVB, TDC advertisement is another way of doing that, where you can be a part of those platforms that go higher up into the discovery funnel for exposure. And you can be a part of that dialogue. And hopefully, through good content, good exact detail of what your content is, you can garner a lot of initial interest directly to you, very high in the funnel, because of what they discover about you on the platform that is actually occupying that space. So, creating a social campaign is about making sure that your content and your purpose are amplified compared to what its value is for being discovered. And from that, you have to be the next question is, if where you are talking to these people, at what stage, discovery, education, or acquisition, what is the information that's most relevant to them at that process? And who are you talking to? So those are two next questions you have to answer. The what is probably the basis of your campaign strategy. It's event driven, it's business cycle driven, but demand to market. It's awareness of your destination in comparison to other destinations that are offering similar to or symbiotic to. We've had that discussion on the live show as well. And then the next most important question, once you find what it is that you're looking for, is you then put it through the filter of who would be interested in what it is that you're offering or the content that you're sharing. And they're hand in hand the same. You may think you have a purpose of, well, we have this particular event that's coming up. Let's take this as an example prone discussion. We have an event that's coming up, and we want to sell the hotel out for the duration of that event. Okay. So now we have a defined audience. What does that audience look like? So we have the purpose. Now we have to define the audience. Then the audience goes into our persona discussions we've had before. What is the aspects of these people that we know historically or preemptively, based on what it is that they're coming for? If it's an event that's expensive to go to, maybe there's an income component that you need to filter. If it is family driven, it's a family component that is driven. And if so, what's the age of the kids and the children that you're being brought with? What's the duration of their time that they're staying with? What are the things that they have to be concerned with? You create these personas of those people you're marketing to that are relevant. Don't pick them because you think they're that way. Pick them because they reflect the accuracy of what those people are. And there doesn't have to be one persona. You're not making a universal avatar. You're making a digital avatar persona of a person or personages related to exactly the campaign that you're creating. And the tools that are available on the social media platforms are really quite excellent because you're thinking, okay, well, that's great. I have this image of who I think it is. It's a family of four. The kids are no older than 11 years old. The parents are probably no older than 40 years old. Their income levels probably combined at around 150,000. They're probably staying here for 3 to 5 days because the event runs over the course of the weekend. They're looking at least double rooms. Most of them drive in. They don't fly in. It's a drive-in event. These are all things you write down. You put these into a category. Great. Now you go to tools like Facebook Insights and say, great, I'm looking for this criteria, these family count makeups, this age makeup, this geographic area, drive market. How far do they travel? Is it a same day trip? Is that a 3 to 6 hour trip? Well, 3 hours is 150 miles, 6 hours is 300 miles, or thereabouts. And if that's the case, there's your radius. And income is around 150. Great. So you designate your income parameters necessary for this. And do they have education parameters? Are they college bound people, or they're college? Or are they working class? Are these considerations at all they need to have? Are you just making guesses, or is it truly they come because it's a college event? Well, the likelihood is they're alumni of that college event or what have you. So the any criteria you have about them, you put in Facebook Insights, and it's going to create an audience size of what, based on what you're saying is the parameters of this group of people, to what they think would be an audience size sufficient to advertise to. And you take that and you put it into an ad campaign. You create an ad campaign. Now, this is in lieu of any CRM data that you already have of previous guests. We'll get to that in a different discussion. We're already talking about social media campaign development, and we're developing it from a scratch perspective. We're not developing it from a CRM perspective. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So you've developed now a campaign based on the filters that you figure are persona based as to the people that are attending to this particular event, as for our example. And you build now ads. Well, what do you put in the ads? Well, what are the important components of whom you've identified persona? You know the event was the driver, and now you've defined the people that are most interested in the event. What's the driver of their concerns to attend the event? Is it your proximity to the event itself? Is it the fact that you have the larger rooms so that the family has room to stretch out in? Excuse me, coffee. Holographic sticker. One of my favorite ones I made so far. Anyways, so you have this campaign beginning to get structured. You have the filters necessary. You decide you want to do this as a newsfeed function. You don't want to do this as an advertisement like buy now, click now. You're doing this as a discovery of content. You want to get engaged in that education phase for people, or the later stage discovery phase of people going, I didn't know there was such an event. That sounds pretty cool. I've never been there before. What should I find out about? You want to make sure you have content that's on your website that is all about this event, dedicated to this. If you feel it's truly the purpose of people's travel, dedicate a content page for it that is all about the information that people are going to need to discover. If there's shuttle services, bus services, parking needs, parking identifiers, like some events, spring up in Texas, I know particularly firsthand that the local township has had an app built specifically to show where everybody has offered up their yard for parking, and they keep track of how many spots they have available, so that when you come into this event, it's a watermelon spinning contest, by the way. It's a watermelon thumping contest, actually. Another story. But they actually show you where you can park in town, whether and if it's for pay, how much it is, and so forth. And the town decided to do this. Well, are there things like that that people need to be made aware of, so that they don't have FOMO or I missed the biggest ball of twine or whatever it is? Give them that information that authenticates you for people discovering this event, and it also authenticates you for people to decide to want to stay with you because they feel like you're truly helping them in the discovery process. So having that content in place, having the filters of the people that you think are most interested for this event in place, having the idea of when it is that they're most interested in staying with you, now define what it is that's the most important for them to be aware of. And that is the benchmark of your ad segmentation. First is awareness of the event and your value availability to it. Second is about your content associated with the event to help people in their discovery of what they need to do to plan for coming to this event. And third is your value proposition associated with the event. So, discovery, informational awareness, value proposition, three steps and stages, three ad sets, three different focuses of where you're driving them to. Actually, to be fair, all of them will drive you to your content page. What in reference to where on the content page they're referring to, whether it's the action items of book or see availability, or here's your event list, or here's your transient list, or here's transportation list, or here's your discovery information. Bookmarking it to where they first show up is just as critical to this. But this is the nascent development of a social media campaign where you've defined the purpose, you've defined the value, you've defined the market, and you've now defined the message. And the message of social is an amplification of the content associated with this event in this example of this. Now, we're pointing to Facebook as for most of all this. There are other social media platforms. And the social media platforms vary according to the demographics that you're most interested in engaging with. Facebook is the most perennial base mainstay anchor point that most people refer to. But you have Instagram, you have WeChat. Now, both of those are also Facebook based, and you can create integrated ad campaigns associated with them depending upon demographics. Not all demographics use all of those platforms, and not all of those platforms share the same type of content well. Instagram is not about having lengthy text dialogue, it's about image engagement, very personalized image engagement, very one-on-one dialogue image engagement. I would say the same is very much about TikTok, with the twist being it's about popularity rather than messaging. It's about fun engagement. It's about relevant interest and sharing and augmenting that so that the message isn't about what you're offering. The message is about how cool something's happening. And by the way, this is who we are for you to find out if we have something to offer. It's not a hard first conversion sell. And that's where, again, going back to our first point of social media, the idea that everything about advertising is what you're selling and offering to sell. Social media is about engagement and communication so that the people are interested in talking to you about whether they want to buy. It's kind of picture going to a used car place. When you're doing your research, you don't know what car you want to buy. You want to just you have an idea, you've picked 3 or 4 models, you've kinda got a feeling you maybe want a suburban thing or a SUV thing, but maybe a sedan is good enough. Not too sure until you sit in them and see what they look like, and you've heard this from one friend and that from another friend. Just wanna go look at them. And nothing's more irritating than getting onto the lot and the lot assistant kind of go, "Oh, yeah, I can put you in this car today." It's like, "Dude, I'm literally looking at it for the first time. Don't tell me what you're gonna sell it to me for until I ask you. Just help me answer questions about this. Let me sit in it. Let me see if I like it. Let me see the other thing I want to compare to." And the smarter salespeople aren't about showing you what you can buy. They're showing you what they have to offer based on what you're interested in asking about. And that's a lot of what social media is about. Is not about buy this, but this is what we have. This is our value proposition. This is what we can do. This is what information we can share. This is how we can be helpful. Presenting your availability is the matter of social media, and it's a matter of social media campaigns. Your ads aren't about buy, click, or click buy, or here's us and here's our offer. It's about being sensitive to what people are wanting to know more about and providing that value. So they say, well, you know what? That sounds pretty cool. Um, you're right next door to that. So what do you get for offering? Let me ask that question. Let me be the one that says, well, I understand your hotel and you've just given me a whole mess of cool information about this event. And so it must mean you're really into this. Let me see what you have that's available. And also, too, I will know I'm a smart enough person to look and say, "Wow, you're right next door to this thing," or you know what, you got a shuttle bus right here, like you said, that goes and goes back. And once I'm there, I don't have to worry about anything. I can go to this event on the shuttle you got. Cool with me. Now I might have other follow up questions like, how busy is the shuttle? Is it really big? Things like that that would be concerned. Or if I have special needs travelers, like Do they have it for wheelchair service? Do they have it available in enough frequencies that, given certain circumstances, I need to go back to the hotel regularly or something, what have you? Those kind of questions can be more advanced information, and then that always means that I'm allowed to connect it with the property, which is a whole nother discussion we'll have on another show about bots and communication capabilities. At what tiers and levels we have that kind of communication. So social media campaigns. The nascent part of this is where in the dialogue process do you begin to inject what you're wanting to create as communication? Because social media is about communication and dialogue. That allows us to go and then create what is the purpose of this dialogue, event driven business cycle, generated brand awareness in the sense of destination interest for people that may not be aware of what we have to offer. From that, who are we talking to? What are their demographic profiles? What are the things that we know about them? And we can have several variations of this, not just one. And then from that, what is the most interesting for them to be aware of for us? What is it that we have that is the most intriguing for them that they need to know about the types of rooms we have, the proximity to something, the services we offer, whatever it is that get incorporated into the three-tier criterias of what it is we're trying to present, which is our value proposition, who we are, and what we have to offer. Um, Going through that whole process is how you create using like things like Facebook Insights and so forth. You might decide to use LinkedIn because you're more business related. You're trying to create the interest of what your value proposition is for your conference spaces or your location to business hubs or offices or your proximity to other business events or conference facilities and what have you, or your own conference facilities. You might use Pinterest because yours is more about aesthetics of enjoying the uniqueness of the locale, and there might be a culinary aspect to this. There are several different segmentations associated with social media campaigns that go along with organic content development. Some of the simpler ones are soft adventure, culinary, off the beaten path, cultural and historic, local. These are and family are all variations to storylines and content that you perennially share organically, and then you also share by enhancing those organic posts with paid posts. So you keep into the dialogue of the discussion about people discovering and being educated in what where you're located and what your value proposition is to them. I've often equated many of my presentations with walking into a very large conference, and we all know that sound of hearing a thousand voices talking. You can't hear any one particular topic conversation, but you hear a thousand voices. And as you get closer to a group of people, you begin to hear their voices and begin to hear their dialogue. And the worst thing we can do is walk up without any predication of even listening to what's being said and simply say, "Hey, my name is such and such, and I do hotels, and I have a great rate for $129 if you're interested." First off, we don't even know if it's relevant to what they're talking about. Secondly, even if it was possibly relevant to what they're talking about, it wasn't well timed as to what they were talking about, as to whether they would need to know that, or even trust us that they would want to buy something like that. The best thing for us to do is to walk to the group, listen to them talking, determine first off if we even have anything worthy of contribution to their discussion in any context or form, awareness of their topic, awareness of their information, whatever. And should that happen, share first what we have to offer in the sense of, oh, you know what? I heard that too. And you know what? That's right down the road from us. And you're right. That's a great thing, great place, great whatever. And you get them to, and eventually they'll be like, well, who are you? Oh, I'm the hotel down the way. So, oh, really? Wow. I've never stayed there. Oh, you should try it sometime. Oh, someone coming, such a, oh, you know what? I can hook you up. We got a rate of such and such. It's and really nice, da, 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 so forth. That's what that does. Well, that's social media in a nutshell, really. You first go to see who is talking about what, whether you have anything to contribute to that dialogue. And from that, you figure out what's the best way you can augmently help that dialogue without trying to sell something. And then eventually show the value proposition of what they could do if they did buy something from you. So that's several ways of discussing the same thing. Um, each social platform has its own methodology. I'll give you some examples. Twitter is about being in that 7-second spectrum. The feed on Twitter is insane. There's ways to clear that up by creating lists and also following hashtags, which is a reference point to topics and content that you're most interested in. Um, But for the most part, Pinterest is image based. The cool part about Pinterest is it has its own platform of data. It doesn't share in and out data from other places into its data. So the only content that Pinterest shares is content that's placed on Pinterest. So you have a ecosystem of audience in Pinterest, which means that if you can share content that's relevant to an audience that's interested in that content, you get a tremendously loyal engagement with Pinterest, and that's great for Smurf business, weddings, and fraternal order, where people are looking for new ways to do things like that. Wedding information, of course, is paramount to that kind of stuff. Um, Engagements for food and beverages is one of those things. Lifestyle is a very big thing in Pinterest as well, and the demographics are really broadened out. It used to be very female oriented. Out of categories, but men have certainly come into that space, and older categories of people have come into that space as well. It's a very powerful platform to use and very affordable when it comes to advertising. Going back to Twitter, Twitter is very fun because you have to be very present and pushy in Twitter. It is really about what I have to offer and find it out right here. It's very much in front at the moment kind of content and dialogue and very instantaneous back and forth. But it's also incredibly well filtered if you want to do advertisement. You can pick it down to, and I use this example all the time in my discussions, is Twitter. I did ad sets and they were great and they generated traffic and so for engagement and so forth, but it really wasn't anything to write home about, so to speak, until I started changing other filters like music genre and then down to the artist, which you wouldn't think. Well, you're talking about hospitality. Why are you talking about music genres? People magnate towards genres of music and certain artists depending upon also their similar interest categories. It's a reflection of other interest categories. So I found certain music genres and certain artists within those genres that 3 and 5 times fold increased my traffic because I targeted those people with the predication that that was a filter of interest associated with other interests that I think were relevant to what I was talking about, and it proved to be very true. A really incredibly high engagement. When you're dealing with the Instagram things of the world, you're dealing with a very feel good personalized engagement process. Just broadcasting what you're doing is not a value proposition on that platform. Intimate engagement of here's an amazing chicken dish we just made, or here is an amazing sunset that we had, is about a feel of engagement of this is us to you. This is you talking to us. Very, very particular compared to where Facebook is more about this is what we have, this is what we're talking about. These are things we think you'd be interested in. It's more of an open dialogue in the hopes of that people respond back, you respond back to them, so forth and so on. TikTok is about, yes, we have something that we think is engaging about what we're talking about, and we have a creative way of doing it, and that gives you the virility of the dialogue. Let's also not forget some of the other bigger players that we don't talk about that often, and that is like YouTube advertisement. YouTube is a massive, massive opportunity. The downfall of our industry in a great large degree is we don't have a lot of rich media. We've been hobbled for so long with ownership's perspective of what's considered proper media, proper images. And those are usually pictures of very stylized pictures of an empty lobby, porte cochere of a hotel, an empty, pristine pool that's been photoshopped correctly around it so that there's nothing that detracts you from the beauty of the common area that it's showing. Meeting space perfectly set up but empty. These are not engagement pieces, and they're certainly not videos. We have gotten very tolerant in these past year and a half, given all the things that have happened in the pandemic, of Zoom calls and the technology flaws that happened from that, and the less than professional, polished news coverages where newscasters were broadcasting from home with backdrops that were their home. And if they had green screens, it was maybe, but I like the when you just had the home thing, so forth and so on. Like this, isn't awards, pictures, banners, badges of places I spoke at, whatever. Um, it's a visual augmentation of the discussion. And so because of that, we haven't really latched on to making videos like that as much as we should. We should have that kind of content. The whole purpose of our hospitality TV channel is to begin to share content relevant to our industry so that we have this medium of engagement that people have become very comfortable with, which is their TV and or large monitors or what have you, to engage with content rather than having to read it or just simply listen to it or see it in static picture form, all stylized. So the more rich media you can do for YouTube, where you can have pre-roll, post-roll interceptions. There's a whole variety of ways to advertise in YouTube, and it's very successful, very popular. It's the second largest search engine in the world. Um, and you should have this content to represent your product. And it's not hard to do, and it's very affordable to do. From the cameras that you have to purchase to the fact that it's sitting on your phone now, you can do the cameras on these phones, absolutely stunning and totally capable. In fact, the big claim to fame of the new iPhone 13 is the cinematographic quality, where it creates the foreground focusing versus the background focusing, and the ability to transition between them makes it very movie-esque. And that's a phone. So why not make content that is relevant to your business? And it's not that hard. It just takes the getting over the hump of, I don't know this, or I haven't tried this, or I don't know if it's worthy of it. Trying it and doing it is the best way to solve all of those problems. So with that in mind, YouTube tracking, YouTube advertisement, Facebook advertising, and YouTube is a social media spectrum. It is a search engine, but it's also, I would say, social media in the sense of its engagement content, how it shares content. YouTube is a captivating platform. You can be lost in it for hours for all the little, because they're very good about putting content up that they think you're most interested in based on what you've been looking at. And it is connected to Google in all the other aspects. It is Google. So for that reason, it comes up very well in the results of what it is you're most interested in watching. And as you begin to look for more content, you would be surprised, which kind of brings us to a little bit of a dialogue of our news items today. It came up in the news recently, not new news for those that keep closer to it, that Facebook is going to be announcing a change of name on its 28th, October 28th, next week's event. A lot of people are considering it very similar to what Google did for itself by reorganizing itself under one company called Alphabet. There's several other companies that followed that suit in the same ways. But what makes the Facebook change very unique is that for a long time standing, for us geeks, um, Facebook has been very, very deep into the VR technology, meta universe space. And that's a terminology that was not used in a positive way when it was first brought up in literature. The metaverse was a reference to a virtual world that people escaped from a dystopian society in. So the fact that Facebook is adopting that terminology for its marketing message and its brand mission statement is a unique perspective. But given that I'm a VR geek and I have had a Oculus Quest 2 now for just a little over a year, um, the value proposition of what VR AR is going to provide for us is the new frontier for a lot of people's future tense technology engagements. So Facebook, by far, and they're much smarter people that work there than I am, are well aware of the value potential. I can say firsthand that VR is a direction that things are going in lots of ways. AR as well, and I think AR will be the first positive or first technological impact on our travel uh, in real world compared to the VR environment of the total engrossment. Now, let me make the comparison. AR, augmented reality, is a little bit what Google tried a few years ago with their Google glasses, which is similar to putting a pair of glasses and there's a projection on the glasses that, as you're looking around, it gives you additional information. Um, you see it sometimes on your phone. If you're a Home Depot person or something, that there's a piece of furniture you're looking at the area in the room that you want to put it in, you can get the piece of furniture and put it in that space virtually as you're looking through your screen on your phone to what that piece of furniture would look like in that empty space in the real world before you buy it. That's augmented reality. Virtual reality is the full submersion into a completely different perspective outside of the reality that you're in. Me sitting at my desk with my computer monitors is real world. Me putting on a VR headset, I could be standing on Mount Everest, and I have, and it's actually amazing. There's different quality levels, but the quality level is getting so crazy good, so crazy fast. There's amazing travel apps in virtual reality. There's one app that where you have Google Streets, where you can look on a map on your computer and go there as if you're standing in the street because all the little Google cars drove around and took pictures of everything on the streets. You can do that in VR, so you can go anywhere in the world and be wherever these cameras were at. And great resolution. It's not as weirdly distorted as some of these ones are. It's really like you're staying in the street looking around, like, and literally street below you, up above the sky, you're looking around, and the houses or the buildings or whatever it is there. But then there's also ones that do matting, which is amazing. Where picture that these national monument places that are so busy and so regulated and so overbooked, like Page, Arizona, when you go into the beautiful sandstone carvings of water and so forth, you can never be there alone. And oftentimes, then they restrict how many people can be there. And even if you're there, you can't be there for very long. And it's never at that pristine moment with the light shining through the area above it into the area, so it lights up the wall and stuff. That's a magical moment that only a few people get to see at that time. Well, on VR, you can put a headset on, you can stand there by yourself and walk around virtually this place. I mean, when I say walk, as in you're in the real world, walking in the space that's defined by the VR, walk around as if you're walking on the floor of this place, looking around and looking up at the walls and seeing as if you were there by yourself at the most pristine time of day. Now, picture that in a variety of places around the world. And that's what you have. I went to Notre Dame before the fire and walked around the church. And I was up in the bell tower where I never, as a tourist, would ever be, even though I was there in real part. And it's just amazing to be able to see these things in virtual reality. So the fact that Facebook is going this direction is very interesting. Now, I've been doing it for lots of different reasons. One of the cool parts is that Facebook, as we all know, is a nameless, faceless entity when it comes to problems. You have nobody you can just call. You can't pick a phone number up with Facebook and say, "Hey, Facebook, I have a problem with my account." It's you have to go through all these weird platforms like, well, fill this form out and submit this and whatever have you. It takes forever. You don't think anybody's on the other end of the line. They're dedicating real people to VR. And one of the shortcuts we've had, and from a business perspective, is because of that, getting a VR headset means that you can actually, through your VR account, go, "Hey, I got a problem," and there's a person on the other end that's going to go over and communicate with you about solving the problem. So it's been kind of a shortcut process of being able to solve some Facebook issues that are not VR related, simply for the fact of having an account that, because you use your Facebook account on Oculus, because Oculus was bought by Facebook several years ago. They invested heavily in this virtual reality platform. And they're getting now, actually on the 20th, also, they're going to be announcing probably the new version of the headset that I have, the Oculus Quest 2. I think they're calling it the Oculus Pro. Preemptive statement there. Lighter, better, whatever have you, I mean, technology improvements. And the affordability is incredible. These things used to be several $1,000s, and they had to be cabled into your computer, and you had to have a really strong computer to run this. Now, these Oculus Quest 2 are $299. They don't have to be plugged into anything. They run themselves. They just have to be connected to Wi-Fi, and you get the benefit of it. And so it makes it much more engaging and affordable for other people. Whether that price point keeps coming down or not, who's to say? But the affordability and the functionality of it is only improving over time. The monies that are being made, of course, are well there. But that is the direction that Facebook is going. So with that comes the challenge: are you going to be in that space? No, I can tell you right now, as our industry, we're not going to be in that space very well, because we're not even already in the space that exists in that, in the sense of we don't really have a lot of videos. We're not really using YouTube video as much as we should be. Some are doing great jobs, but it's some, not all. As an industry, we're really lagging behind that rich media engagement, let alone VR. There's a guy that I follow on VR that really is cool. He takes a 360 camera, which is no more different than what I have. I have a $299 um, 360 1X Pro, not Pro, what 1X, and you put it on a little stick, and he puts it on the beach, and he lets it sit there for about 30 minutes. People walk by, they're looking at this little camera on a stick. It's a 360 camera, and then he puts it up into the, there's a whole YouTube VR world, by the way, and he puts it up there, and you can literally sit on this beach, being the camera. You can be there, the person, and you're just there for 30 minutes looking around. It's a recording, okay? It's not live. It's a recording, and you're on this beach. So if you want to be on the beach, you can do that. You can be in different beaches. He goes around Florida to different beaches, and he just puts the camera there and records for 30 minutes, so you can visit all these beaches. It's an amazing first-person experience. Imagine that in your marketing portfolio. Yes, it doesn't have a huge VR audience. So right now, they think the VR audience is just a little over, what did they say? Somewhere around 4 million, 4.5 million people. And that's with the Oculus headset. There's more than that, but that's the Oculus Quest 2. I think they sold that many. Might be even larger than that from the last numbers. But so you're not dealing with a massively large audience, but you're dealing with a very engaged audience. And eventually, if this is the case, if this is the focus of Facebook and what they're going to spend their resources in developing and cultivating, that audience is only going to grow. Your ability to create content in that is going to be pretty profound and pretty helpful when it comes to people being able to expose the fact that, hey, this is our hotel. Compared to all the other hotels that you're being compared to, if you have a VR engagement program where people can go say, hey, we can show you the whole hotel. Put your headset on, go here and play this video. And we can walk you through the front door and we can show you the cool places and we show you the rooms, all this other stuff. Now you have a very first person experience of that hotel compared to others. You have a very good idea of whether or not you're interested in it or not. Now, there's lots of other cool stuff that's going on. Like Amazon has their guided tours, where you right now can go and to get a live guided tour on your TV or on your computer, where somebody's on the other end walking you around with a camera live in Cinque Terre. In Italy and Positano, and show you places and go into restaurants and so forth. And if you want to buy some of the products, Amazon's conveniently made it available for you to buy the products and all this other stuff. But you can see whether or not that's something you want to do in real life. This isn't necessarily a substitution. Back when COVID was at its peak in the pandemic, fingers crossed that's a past tense statement, um, then it was escapism for us to be able to go see these places that weren't available to us to travel to. Now it's a precursor to whether we're interested in it. If I'm making in that, remember that discovery phase we're talking about in the educational phase. If I'm trying to discover what I'm interested in doing, should I go to St. Petersburg, Russia to see there, or should I go to Copenhagen to see there, or should I go to Amsterdam to see there, or should I go to Barcelona to see there? And I can do these videos of looking or going to a tour and showing these places. Say, well, that's what I want to do. That's very interesting. Or you know what, I like this better than that, or whatever. That's the value proposition. Well, scale it down to even more real world, and that is okay. I want to go to Aspen versus Vail. What's the difference? Well, Aspen does a wonderful 360 tour of their mountainside skis and showing you their slopes and what it is to be on them and what are the amenities and their lifts and their refreshments and restaurants and their interviews with people at restaurants. Now you've just described exactly why we have hospitality TV, because that's exactly the kind of stuff where we're talking about the hospitality industry. What are we doing as an industry? We're not there to do diners and drive-ins and dives, which is a great program, by the way, to be discovering on restaurants and things that you want to try because of what they do. But we're there from the industry side, which is this is what it takes to do this stuff. This is what it is for us to run this place. This is what it's like to be this type of equipment, or this is the type of service, or this is the type of training. We need to get ourselves geared as an industry to be in the forefront of people's awareness of what we are. So that's my on the soapbox statement about VR, but that's also a little bit about our news item, about Facebook's name change plans. Is we are seeing shifts. We're beginning to see the impact associated with what the pandemic has done for us as a time consumption. We've already seen it from a labor perspective. We've already seen the impact of people's perception of their work environments and their work desire and their work interests. And we lost a tremendous amount of people from an industry we were already shorting of people that could be working with us. So we have this new impact, which is the technology advancements that are changing because of what this past year and a half now plus have been. We're going to see more of that. We're dealing with the current relevancy of shortages and supply chains and all this other stuff. We're going to see people alter their lifestyles even farther based on the realities of our current life. We have to stop thinking of new normals and just say this is the normal. How is it that we're doing things differently to adjust for these? That goes to larger discussions. I want to touch briefly on another news item that was of an article from where are we? This came out of coverage of the HSMAI's Revenue Management Rock Conference. There was an opportunity with revenue managers talking about new reference points for data. We've talked about this on the live show about creating aggregate average mean rate reference points for data as a method of benchmarking ourselves. There was several speakers in the discussion about revenue management as to what they still use as reference points. Sad to say, a lot of their comments I discount because it's unrealistic. They're still holding on to old methodologies, even though they're discounting them, saying, "Oh, we still use our RevPAR index, but we don't weigh it as much as we used to." Then why are you using it? What have you used to be adaptive would be my challenge to them, which I didn't go to the conference. So I didn't get to raise my hand and ask that. But I would ask them this, like, so if you're not using it the same way that it was intended to be used, what are you using instead of it other than saying, oh, that's kind of fun, but we're not using it? And then just saying, well, are we selling more rooms than we were before? Before what? Last week, last month, last 6 months, last year over year? How better way do you have of creating a number that is more relevant as a benchmark than just saying good, bad, red, green, up, down? And so I would challenge all of the revenue managers that were contrite in their statements of those is like, that's nice, but that's not relevant. Um, I also, the other discussion that I wanted to bring into the news items from Hotel News Now was about the increase in management companies because the brand's falling so far short of what they did. I I forgot about this statement. It was called manchised versus franchise to franchise, and this was the management ownership companies relying on the brands to manage and operate. They were very despondent with the fact that they furloughed so many people. There was nobody other on the other end of the line to support them. So a lot of those ownership groups that were relying upon the brand to manage them went to management groups like Cambridge and and Prism as the examples in the articles. Which anyway, um, that they went to them because they needed somebody as a resource. They didn't have the brand side resource to this. They kept their brand flag over it, but in reality, they're being now run by third party management companies because the brand failed, which kind of goes to our earlier discussions from previous aspects of our live show. So, a little bit of news items towards the end, a lot about social media in that sense. We look forward to any feedbacks and comments you have in relationship to the show. If you have other topics and interests that you have for us, I was going to tell you what we're going to talk about for next week, but I'm going to skip that for right now because I might change the topic based on our discussions this week. So I will be making on the follow up on the announcement for our next week's show number 325. What the topic will be probably Monday of next week. Again, we're to the format of one topic, 1 hour. We're at that point at this point. Um, we, yes, I think it's going to be very fun and interesting. As I'm thinking about this, sorry, my mind wandered off as to what I want to talk about next week. Of course, we'll have our podcast broadcast today as well, which will recap of today's show, plus also some tools that we always do each podcast as a reflection of tools that we can use for different functions and our techniques. And we'll expand a little bit more on some other newsworthy items for our discussion as well. So thank you all for the privilege of your time. My name is Lauren Gray. Please follow us on Hospitality Channel TV. You can look up on your Roku Plus, Amazon Prime, Google Play, Google TV, Android, iOS, and Apple TV, where they're and plus also we simulcast as always on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So with that, thank you again. We look forward to next week's discussion. This show will be simulcast again 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australia time, and 11:30 a.m. UK, London time. For those people in our APAC and EU areas. So thank you again, and we look forward to talking to you all next week.
Busboys or bellmen, and that can happen to you too, but it doesn't happen to everyone. It happens if you work for it. But we're here to mentor you along the way. And just the sad part about it is that a lot of front desk people or whatever, I think you were talking about front desk before, standing up for 8 hours and being pleasant every day,